We had the good fortune to have my dear friend Sumeda with us as a guest speaker. And she shared about, the necessity of being with the not knowing in order for growth and maturation to happen. We simply need, to open up space for emergence of what we don't know yet. And we are doing that, by way of expanding and shifting perception intentionally. And, that's what we are mainly kind of training here on those Wednesdays. We are training to expand perception so that new ways of looking, become available. And that, takes us into what's called the stretch zone. And that can feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that's, what is the path of growth is, to voluntarily venture into the stretch zone and try to stay out of the panic zone, but be in the stretch zone with a sense of, devotion and dedication and, the wish to learn and to mature and to make oneself, available for this self-healing mechanism to land in us more fully. Because, perception in and of itself is empty and therefore totally shapeable, and we can intentionally support a more inspiring and uplifting understanding of what's happening in our world today in order, to stay energized and engaged. Because if we see things, just like very small view, then it's really, we could just despair and think this is just like absolutely unacceptable what's happening here. But if we are opening up to the bigger picture, we can see there is something happening, which we actually want to happen. We want the old paradigm to disintegrate, but we would like it to disintegrate really nicely. I would like that too, but that's not how the Dhamma works. That's not how nature works. We are not in the center of everything. And that's like a hard truth, to swallow and metabolize. And I think that's what we are doing here together. The staying engaged takes us naturally beyond the boundaries we have been conditioned into. And, I remember my first teacher, Ajahn Buddhadasa, giving this example about, scientists, put fish into a fish tank and then they put a glass plate into the middle of the tank. And when the fish would try to swim to the other side, they bang themselves, on that glass plate. And that was, of course, very painful. And then after some time, they removed the glass plate, but the fish didn't anymore swim, beyond. Even the plate wasn't there because the pain, and the training which they had received over some weeks, I suppose, had just been so deeply ingrained in their system that just wouldn't swim anymore to the other side. And I hope, we are not like that, because that's what we need. We need to be able to move into a bigger space and take ourselves, not so important. And there's also this beautiful quote by Rob Babaya, is an English Dhamma teacher who was resident teacher at Gaia House and passed away, I think, maybe like 8 years ago or so. And he said, practice is not practice unless it affects perception. Practice is not practice unless it affects perception. And in another way we could say that means, if we are able, to not be completely mesmerized by the story, but can move more into the structure of our experience. For example, what's called the 3 characteristics in the Buddhist teaching. Rather than being completely glued on the content of the story, we see, all stories are impermanent, all stories are unsatisfactory, and all stories are empty of a self. So, having that structural view can help us to not be completely drowning in the story. And then, we get sucked into the story again, and then we remember, oops, with awareness, and then we come out and in, out, and then the capacity, to have this bigger picture view becomes more and more stable through repetition. And, today I'd like to introduce to you a 12-point list by the late Joanna Macy from her book, World as Lover, World as Self. Came out the 2nd edition with Parallax Press in 2021. And there is this list on page 201 to 207, which is called the Holonic Shift. And for those who don't know what a holon is something that is simultaneously a whole in and of itself, as well as a part of a larger whole. Just like all of us here are in the Zoom room, we are all individuals, and at the same time, we are forming together a pocket of sanity inside of the earth, inside of the cosmos. So it's that way of looking. And before I go over this list, as a means of encouraging our opening to what is already underway, I'd like to just, suggest we all find a posture, comfortable posture we can sustain for about 40 minutes. And, bringing our awareness into the body, sensing the body from inside. The weight of the body as it meets the cushion, meets the chair, which is, on the ground. And underneath that ground there's the soil. And as we are landing, just noticing what am I bringing here today, how am I feeling. And whatever is here, holding it with spacious awareness, and allowing it to be there and to change and settle down, and letting any kind of a tiredness or discomfort, contraction, allowing it to leak, to go down into the ground, drop down, and in that way, connecting us more fully with where we are through the sense of sensing the gravity. sitting inside of planet Earth, which is spinning very fast through space. And we can't sense that velocity at all because we are inside of the planet. The planet is going up, up, up above our heads. And down, down, down underneath where we are sitting. And we are embedded inside of it. And fully kept, nourished and supplied with everything we need in order to be in the way we are. Like a cell inside of a vast body, which is inside of an even vaster body, influenced by many other bodies like the sun and the moon and the stars. A process which we are never able to really fully comprehend, but we can surrender to it, we can attune to it. And we can just simply drop the expectation to ever fully know what this is, because we don't have to. The only thing, we need to be interested in is how we can cooperate. It's not about the what, but it's about the how. And, I've heard that indigenous languages have very little nouns, very little about what. It's all about how. How do these apparent entities, how do they behave? Including ourselves, how do I relate to my experience is the central question in the Buddhist teaching. And how can I relate to my experience in a way which is growthful rather than which is keeping everything pinned down. So the how, that's the question, and this is where we can make a difference through practice. By opening up space for more information, to flow in and be understood by experiencing it. Ajahn Sumedho, would always say understood. He would illustrate it with the simile of to stand under something, to really stand very close to something and to feel and sense it. That's understanding. It's not something, by looking from a distance, like a little bit, pull back and try to figure it out with the head. No, that's not how it works. The head is helpful, to open up doors, maybe get us going, but then the process itself is a direct experience, intuition, visceral understanding. Which we have to come back to at this time, of this vast shiftings which are going on. Where we know on the one hand, that this is what needs to happen, and then at the other hand, we are scared because it's completely out of control. But as we are, expanding perception, something else comes online, a deeper sense of belonging. By, letting go of human supremacy. And also observing the backlash, in some areas of society, human supremacy is gonna get more and more intense. And that's just like a fear response. Going into polarizing and even into fascism, which is the most intense version of not engaging. And it can't really sustain itself for too long, but for now, it's still happening. And it's scary, of course. Especially, I come from Austria, and there's a few other people here, from Europe, German speaking. For us, it's not a long time ago. So breathing up the stability from the ground, earth element. Earth element, which is showing up in so many shapes, trees and animals and rocks, plants. It's really not all about us. But we have a very great potential to be stewards of the unfolding of life on this planet. We have that potential. And we are now at a crossroads, where there's this great opportunity to lift up. And choose a new flowering of life. Because at the same time we have the capacity to, wield a lot of destruction. So, being aware that we are part of a collective self-healing mechanism of this planet. And we can know that, we can live in that knowing just be aware of it, to bring that back again and again, in the service of life. So, on the one hand, grounding in the stability of the earth through the earth body. And then, taking refuge in awareness, refuge in Buddha, that which knows that we are just a little cell inside of a much vaster process. And keeping that perception alive through cultivating it. And this list by Joanna Macy, I find that very helpful as food for reflection. And the first point is attune to a common intention. This intention is not a goal or plan that you can formulate with precision. It is rather an open-ended aim that we may meet common needs and collaborate in new ways. That we may meet common needs and collaborate in new ways. A common intention. And then the next one is number 2, welcome diversity. Self-organization of the whole requires differentiation of the parts. Each one's role in this unfolding journey is unique and valuable. Each one's role in this unfolding journey is unique and valuable. Number 3, know that only the whole can repair itself. We cannot fix the world, but we can take part in its self-healing, healing wounded relationships and legacies, is integral to the healing of our world. We cannot fix the world, but we can take part in its self-healing. Number 4, learn to trust. You are only a small part of a much larger process, like a nerve cell in a neural net. Trust means taking part and taking risks when you cannot control or even know the outcome. Learn to trust. And it's, a learning. It's not like just trust, but learn to trust. And as we are learning to trust, all of the unfinished business gets activated, individually and collectively. Traumas. Number 5, open to flows of information from the larger system. Do not resist painful information about the condition of our world. Understand that your suffering for the world arises from connection and unblocks feedback that is important for the well-being of the whole. Understand that your suffering for the world arises from connection and unblocks feedback. That's why we, need the visceral connection, because it changes us on the level of neural networks. It unblocks feedback loops, which is, a big problem that there's a constipation going on in the system. And then number 6, speak the truth of your experience of this world. If you have persistent responses to present conditions, assume that they are shared by others. Willing to drop old answers and old roles, give voice to the questions arising in you. Willing to drop old answers and old roles, giving voice to the questions arising in you. Number 7, believe no one who claims to have the final answer. Such claims are a sign of ignorance and limited self-interest. Number 8, work in teams on joint projects serving common intentions. Build community through shared tasks and rituals. Building community. That's what we are doing here. Be generous with your strengths and skills. They are not your private property, and they grow from being shared. They include both your knowing and your not knowing, as well as the gifts you accept from the ancestors and all beings. Your skills are not your private property. Draw from the strength of others. Acknowledge and appreciate their strengths. Never prejudge what a person can contribute, but be ready for surprises and fresh forms of synergy. Be ready for surprises and fresh forms of synergy. The number 11, be content not to see the results of your work. Your actions may have unanticipated and far-reaching effects unknown to you in your lifetime. Let there be serenity in all you're doing. Even while putting forth great effort, you are held within the web of life within flows of energy and intelligence far exceeding your own. You are held within the web of life, within flows of energy and intelligence far exceeding your own. And having the Buddha's teaching as a way to surrender into that intelligence, which is, called the Dharma in our case. And, remembering that the Buddha in the night of his awakening, he was touching the earth. Calling the earth, to be his witness, that he has basically finished his work here. And we are all still here. And on the path, and at this point in history, it's about our species, letting go of the childish assumption of that it's all about us. That's it's quite a tall order, but we are the generation, where it really starts to come into the mainstream, that understanding, and it's what it is. And reflecting on the good fortune that we at least, know that at least we really can sense somehow being called, to participate by opening rather than closing down. We all know that, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And then we have this ancient teaching, which is all about skillfully letting go of me and mine. As difficult as that is, but we're doing it. We are on it. We have the path. And that then learning to trust. And that's something I'm also learning, We all have different triggers. If they get, touched, then we need to remember the practice. We have the tools. We can be in the stretch phase. And even sometimes going into the panic, and noticing it and taking care of ourselves. For, being able to stay in the bigger picture. And this list, by Joanna is a inspiration how to open up perception and engage by making, oneself available through a different way of looking at all of it. That is the medicine, that a different way of looking, of not going with the usual ways, which have all emerged out of a view of human supremacy, but just consistently undermining that old way of looking. Every time, we are stepping out of it, it's like if we have a big wall, made out of paper, and every time we step out of that old way of looking is making a hole, and then, you know, at one point it's full of holes, and then at one point it just comes down. And that's what we're all working on, individually and collectively. And there's also people who try to make the wall really bigger and thicker or something, but it's not going to succeed. The wall is coming down because it doesn't belong to anyone. And sensing the body from inside, you know, how it truly is an organ of listening, of connecting, of viscerally being informed. And then I'm saying yes to that. So now I'll leave you to it for the remaining few minutes to just sit